Greetings, history enthusiasts. Today we embark on a profound and haunting journey through the records of World War II as we delve into the terrifying tale of Irma Grese, a name synonymous with cruelty and sadism. Join us as we peel back the layers of darkness surrounding this infamous Nazi guard responsible for unspeakable acts of horror at Auschwitz and Bergen Belsen. From her vicious punishments to the haunting echoes of her sadistic laughter, this riveting chapter of history unveils the depths of human cruelty that will leave you both appalled and fascinated. So, gather your courage, for we are about to descend into the heart of darkness where Irma Grese's reign of terror awaits. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more history secrets. The liberation of Bergen Belsen, unveiling the horrors of Nazi death camps. On April 15th, one of the worst Nazi concentration camps, Bergen Belsen, is freed by the British 11th Armored Division. Bergen Belsen would come to symbolize the true bestiality and horrors of the Nazi regime and its death camps. British forces discovered 13,000 unburied bodies and nearly 60,000 sick and starving prisoners. In the months after the camp's liberation, thousands of other inmates succumbed to diseases like typhus and tuberculosis. Male and female Nazi personnel responsible for these atrocities are captured by the British and made to assist in the burial of the bodies in mass graves. The early life of Irma Grese, growing up in Nazi Germany. Irma Grese was one of them. She became one of the most notorious criminals under the Nazi regime. On October 7, 1923, Irma Grese was born in Rechen, which was part of the Weimar Republic, the government of Germany from 1918 to 1933. Both of Irma's parents worked in the dairy industry, and she was the third of 5 children. The Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, took power in January 1933. The Nazis were expert propagandists who used cutting-edge methods of advertising and communication to spread their ideas. Children and teenagers were targeted by the creation of Nazi Party youth groups like the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls. Young Germans were also mobilized for war by these organizations. Irma's dad never let her or her brother join any Nazi youth groups, despite their wishes to do so, because he was not a Nazi sympathizer and hated everything to do with the Nazis. Schools also played a significant role in spreading Nazi ideas among German youth, so it was impossible to avoid indoctrination. Irma Grese and other German children were inculcated with the Hitler cult from their earliest days in the classroom, where portraits of the Führer hung prominently. While some books were banned, German educators replaced them with ones that promoted Nazi ideals, such as admiration for Hitler, submission to authority, militarism, racism, and anti-Semitism. Irma's journey from adversity to controversy. When Irma was 13 years old, her mother committed suicide after discovering that her husband had been having an affair with the daughter of a local pub owner. Her Christian father, Alfred Grese, raised her alone and was extremely harsh with his children, sometimes resorting to physical punishment. Irma Grese had a terrible track record in the classroom. Helene, Irma's sister, claims that her younger sibling was bullied so severely that she quit school at the age of 14. After working on a farm for a total of 6 months, she relocated to Leuken and opened a shop there for the same amount of time. As an assistant nurse and trainer for the Hohenlychen Sanatorium's medical superintendent, Karl Gebhardt, a Nazi doctor who later conducted medical experiments on prisoners at the Ravensbrook concentration camp during World War II, Grese went there when she was 15 years old in 1939. Criminal beginnings. Irma Grese's arrival at Ravensbrook. Irma, at the age of 17, wanted to study nursing so that she could work at Hohenlychen Sanatorium, but she was sent to a dairy farm in Furstenberg instead to operate a butter machine because she did not perform well enough in school. It was in July 1942 that she first entered Ravensbrück concentration camp and began her career of crime there. The Nazis only established one major camp for women, and it was called Ravensbrück. It opened in May of that year. Women from all over Europe, including Poles, Russians, Jews, Gypsies, and others, made up the majority of the camp's female visitors, numbering around 132,000 in total. Over 92,000 women died among those who lost their lives. A total of 150 women worked as supervisors in addition to the SS men who served as guards and administrators at the Ravensbrook camp. Women in these positions of authority were either SS volunteers or women who had accepted the positions for the benefits and pay they offered. Dorothea Binz, a sadistically cruel German Nazi officer and supervisor, ran a training camp for female SS guards at Ravensbrück, teaching them how to treat the prisoners they would later be responsible for. Those in charge of these inmates, like Irma Grese, were tasked with squeezing as much work as possible out of them before they died. About 3,500 women guards were trained at Ravensbrück before being sent on to work at other concentration camps, turning it into a school of violence. Unethical medical experiments at Ravensbrück. Inhumane medical experiments on prisoners at Ravensbrück began in the summer of 1942 and were conducted by SS doctors. Doctors Herta Oberhauser and Fritz Fischer worked alongside Karl Gebhardt as the primary coordinators of these experiments. Female prisoners' legs were frequently broken with hammers. Aggressive bacteria were then introduced into the open wounds, and the prisoners' progress toward healing was carefully monitored with and without the use of early antibiotics like sulfanilamide. In addition, they experimented with different bone setting and transplantation techniques in the hopes that they would aid in the care of military amputees. Amputations were frequently used in these types of experiments, and they were frequently carried out without any sort of anesthetic. The SS recruited nearly 80 women, most of them Polish, to participate in the experiments. Numerous females tragically lost their lives. Those that did make it through often did so with severe physical injuries. Women and children, many of them Roma, were subjected to SS doctors' sterilization experiments so that they could perfect their technique. In addition, they participated in the forced abortions of women who were already 7 or 8 months along in their pregnancies. Also notorious were their forced abortions, as well as their beating of pregnant women to induce miscarriages and their murder of newborns. Irma Grese's transformation into a sadistic guard. It is believed that Irma Grese, then 18 years old, worked as an assistant nurse during the experiments at Ravensbrück and was exposed to atrocities that may have damaged her personality and turned her into a violent sadist, as she knew Karl Gebhardt from Hohenlychen Sanatorium. Her father gave her a good belting or whipping when she returned home in 1943 to tell them she was supervising the prisoners working inside the compound at Ravensbrück. Irma Grese worked at Auschwitz-Birkenau, a concentration camp in German-occupied Poland, beginning in March 1943. The Auschwitz complex included more than 40 camps and sub-camps, the largest of which was Birkenau. There were 10 distinct areas, all of which were physically separated by electric fences. After 1942, SS guards with dogs patrolled the area. Over the course of its 3 years in operation, it served many purposes. It was originally planned to house 125,000 POWs when construction began in October 1941. It opened in March 1942 as a satellite camp of Auschwitz and was used for the systematic murder of Jews. In its final phase from 1944, it also became a place where prisoners were concentrated before being transferred to labor in German industry in the depths of the Third Reich. The journey from Grese to Hyena of Auschwitz. Helene, Irma's sister, claims that when Irma was younger, she was too afraid to defend herself and would instead run away from trouble. However, for the first time in her life at Auschwitz, Grese was in a position to strike people when they could not strike back. And she found it to be quite enjoyable. With the brutality and cruelty that earned Grese the infamous nicknames the Hyena of Auschwitz and the Beautiful Beast, she became one of the most despised and feared guards in the camp. It was said that Grese was a sexual deviant who preyed on the men and women of Birkenau. She was rumored to have had sexual relations with both the notorious Dr. Josef Mengele and the concentration camp commandant Josef Kramer of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and later Bergen Belsen. Dr. Gisela Perl, the former Auschwitz prisoner, said about Irma, "She was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. Her body was perfect in every line, her face clear and angelic, and her blue eyes the gayest, the most innocent eyes one can imagine. And yet Irma Grese was the most depraved, cruel, imaginative pervert I ever came across. Sexual deviance and cruelty. Olga Mengele, an Auschwitz survivor, claims in her memoir Five Chimneys that Grese had extramarital affairs with a number of Nazis, including Dr. Josef Mengele. According to Mengele, Irma Grese would deliberately select the most attractive female prisoners to be sent to the gas chamber out of jealousy and spite. Irma Grese did, however, develop romantic feelings for a few of the female inmates. Irma Grese liked some of the women prisoners. In the case of 16-year-old Nina Kaleska, Grese told her that she looked like her sister Helene. Irma used Kaleska as a messenger and lookout girl when she had lesbian orgies in the barracks and made sure no one came in. Irma Grese had many affairs with other female prisoners. When she got tired of them, she sent them to the gas chamber. She also beat her sexual subjects. When a handsome Georgian man refused Grese's advances toward him, he had to watch Irma dragging his naked girlfriend around the camp by the hair and then whipping her. After Grese tortured the woman he loved, she had the man shot and the woman sent to the camp brothel. When Mengele discovered that she was having affairs with Jewish inmates who were deemed racially inferior, he ended his relationship with her. At Auschwitz, Grese fell in love with SS man Franz Wolfgang Hatzinger, who was the chief engineer of the Auschwitz I construction department. Despite this relationship, Grese had so many lovers that at one point, she developed sexually transmitted diseases, and according to Olga Mengele, she had numerous abortions. Dr. Gisela Pearl performed one of these abortions, and Irma's only concern was the pain she would feel. Upon her arrival at Auschwitz, Grese held various positions within the camp. At first, Grese performed telephone duties. Then she was transferred as a sort of light punishment to be in charge of the commando, which carried stones from the outside into the camp. Grese's reign of terror in Birkenau's Camp C. The Jews of Hungary were scheduled to be killed in May 1944. From May 15th to July 9th, 1944, Hungarian gendarmerie officials, aided by German SS officials, deported approximately 424,000 Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where SS functionaries killed the vast majority of them in gas chambers after arriving and being sorted. As of that same month, at age 20, Grese would take on the role of the senior guard at Birkenau's Lager, or Camp C, where she would be responsible for supervising a rota of 6 to 7 female guards. There were 28 housing units in Camp C, as well as a food block, 2 clothing and underwear stores, 2 or 3 latrine blocks, and 2 washhouse units. The camp was overcrowded, and Grese had 1,000 inmates in each building, despite the fact that the typical capacity is 100 or at most 300. There were bunks in some of the buildings that could fit 5 people, but most of the buildings had neither beds nor bunks. Lager C in Grese held around 30,000 inmates, all of whom were Hungarians, while the Block Altesten were Czechoslovaks. The Block Altester, or block or barracks leader, was a prisoner who was responsible for enforcing rules and keeping order in their assigned barracks. The camp was so crowded that hygiene was a major problem. The latrines stopped working, and as Grese put it later, everywhere you went it was just as if the prisoners thought that any place was good enough for a latrine. She was notorious in the camp for always being armed with a woven leather whip covered in cellophane so that human blood could be easily washed from it. She enjoyed beating inmates with the whip so much that she would stand at the gate whenever the working parties were entering or leaving. Later, she would proudly say, "It was a very light whip, but if I hit somebody with it, it would hurt." After Irma Grese had beaten so many prisoners who had been mistreated, Camp Commandant Josef Kramer ordered her to stop. The woman continued to crack the whip regardless. When prisoners were flogged, it was usually for being late to roll calls or for stealing food because they were hungry. Inmates were required to stand in one place during the lengthy roll calls that typically lasted from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. When they tried to move, they were either beaten or forced to spend hours on their knees. Grese said that she had to whip them because she had lost count of them while they were running to and fro. She would also make these roll calls as difficult as possible by having the prisoners stand holding a large stone above their heads in each hand, and then beating them if they flinched. Inmates once used scraps from their blankets to sew together new outerwear. Grese issued immediate and firm instructions for the return of all products made from these blankets. Since nothing was returned, She ordered a search of the cells and harsh punishment for any inmates found in possession of the items in question. Irma Grese would also beat inmates with a walking stick in addition to her whip. Whippings, beatings, and brutality. Grese's methods of control. Grese enjoyed nothing more than thrashing women until they were bloody and on the ground, at which point she would kick them as hard as she could with her bulky boots. She once witnessed a mother and child communicating across a fence separating two neighborhoods. The prisoner continued to lie on the ground after being severely beaten by Grese. In addition, she was blamed for choosing female inmates with military experience for execution by gas. Her partner in crime, Dr. Josef Mengele, was a frequent collaborator on these pieces. Grese recorded that the women were given special treatment by being sent to the gas chamber. In order to determine whether or not they were fit to work in Germany, survivors later recalled seeing female prisoners paraded naked and inspected like cattle. Grese would be there to maintain order and punish any women who tried to escape by running away. She would beat relatives unconscious and leave them lying on the ground if she caught them conspiring to avoid being picked for forced labor alone. Women who attempted to escape but were caught were brutally beaten until they bled profusely and then returned to their original selection lines. During one such selection, 2 girls who had jumped out of a window in an attempt to escape were lying on the ground when Grese opened fire on them with her always-ready pistol. Grese, however, assisted some inmates as well. For example, Josef Mengele sent 14-year-old prisoner Alice Tenenbaum to the gas chamber 16 times. Each time, Grese rescued her by entering the chamber and retrieving Tenenbaum. After the war, Alice found out that Grese had rescued her so often because she thought she was Irma's sister, Helene. Irma's savage dogs. At Auschwitz, Grese had 2 huge dogs that she starved. Female prisoners had to walk 16 kilometers to get to work, but survivors said she rode a bicycle around the camp with the dogs by her side to keep them company. She gave the order for the dogs to attack anyone who fell behind the column. The female prisoners lost control of their wagon when they saw the female commando bringing stones from outside the camp. It rocked, bowled down the hill, and flipped, sending stones flying in all directions. One survivor later testified about what happened afterward. Irma shot the 2 police dogs on them. The girls tried to escape their fangs, but the trained killers easily overtook them. The dogs were tearing at the girls' bodies. Irma came closer to observe what they were doing. Her eyes were bloodshot. The sight of blood seemed to intoxicate her. Irma Grese maintained a cheerful expression throughout. Grese was known to beat and kick women with her heavy top boots when she took her working parties out. Sending women outside the wire fence while they were working to make it look like they were attempting to escape was another one of her specialties. Additionally, Grese testified at an inquiry against a guard who had refused to shoot the women who had crossed the fire fence on the grounds that they had been sent over on purpose. Irma could pick out any item of clothing she wanted from the best designers across Europe because of the loot taken from the Birkenau concentration camp. Grese had the best Jewish tailors, soon to be inmates at the camp, create custom dresses for her. One of her favorite outfits was a sky blue jacket with a dark blue tie. Irma used to fantasize about being a movie star and spend hours in front of her mirror doing her hair and makeup. Following World War II, Grese said, "I will be in films. There will be a star next to my name on the screen. I've been around and experienced a lot in life. The things I've been through will help me in the long run, I think, as an artist." Grese's involvement in the death marches and horrific conditions. But she was completely wrong. On January 18, 1945, as Soviet forces neared the Auschwitz concentration camp complex, the SS began evacuating Auschwitz and its subcamps, and Irma Grese was among those who escaped. The prisoners in the concentration camps were marched to their deaths. The prisoners were forced to march long distances while under constant watch. In March 1945, Grese and a large number of other Ravensbrook prisoners were transported from Auschwitz to Ravensbrück and from there to Bergen Belsen. The SS would shoot anyone who gave up or slowed down during the march. During these death marches, the prisoners were given almost nothing to eat, and there was also nothing for them when they finally reached the camp. Food at Bergen Belsen consisted of a watery soup made from a variety of turnips cooked in water and 3.5 centimeters of bread a day. as reported by the prisoners who were fortunate enough to survive the war there. Bergen Belsen had appalling sanitation, with insufficient water even for drinking and cooking. There were tens of thousands of prisoners in the camp, and only 200 blankets to go around. During the cold winter months, prisoners had to sleep in a sitting position on the cold floor. The average daily death toll among prisoners in March 1945 was between 250 and 300 as a result of hunger, dehydration, and typhus epidemics. Grese continued to mistreat the inmates at Bergen Belsen until the very end, even though she knew they were so dirty and ill. She still found pleasure in humiliating and torturing starving prisoners by having them kneel and hold stones over their heads. They were also routinely made to wait outside from 3 a.m. until 9 a.m. through snow, ice, and rain. Grese continued to subject female prisoners at Bergen Belsen to brutal physical exercises, including marching, running, and frog jumps until they collapsed from exhaustion, despite the fact that people were dying all around her. She was last seen using a riding crop to punish a young girl roughly 2 weeks before the arrival of British troops, when it was clear that the war had ended. When Grese caught 2 sisters on the eve of liberation eating potato peel scraps from the camp kitchen, she knocked their heads together. She only worked there for 3.5 weeks, but her harsh treatment of the inmates earned her the nickname the Beast of Belsen, Irma Grese's trial that leads to her execution. Irma Grese, along with other Nazi criminals like Josef Kramer, the commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and the last commandant of Bergen Belsen, was captured by the British on April 17, 1945, just 2 days after Bergen Belsen was liberated. About 3 kilometers from Belsen, Grese and other female SS guards were imprisoned in a Wehrmacht Panzer training academy. In response to an English journalist's question about her motivation for committing these crimes, Irma said without remorse, "It was our duty to exterminate anti-social elements so that Germany's future would be assured." On September 17, 1945, justice was served when Grese was tried in the Belsen Trial. Grese responded that the witnesses were lying and making an elephant out of a small fly when they said she was the worst SS woman in the camp. While Grese did confess to the beatings, she denied involvement in any murders, but her falsehoods did not save her from justice. The British military tribunal convicted Irma Grese of treason and sentenced her to death by hanging on November 17th. On December 13, 1945, at the age of 22, she was put to death by British executioner Albert Pierrepoint. Walking to the gallows, her final and only word was schnell, meaning quickly. Grese was the youngest woman to die judicially under British law in the 20th century. There were no tears shed for Irma Grese. The haunting journey through the records of World War II has revealed the terrifying reality of Irma Grese. From her early indoctrination in Nazi Germany to her transformation into a sadistic guard, Grese's journey reflects the depths of human cruelty. The liberation of Bergen Belsen and the horrors uncovered there serve as a dark reminder of the atrocities committed under the Nazi regime. Grese's reign of terror, marked by her sexual deviance, brutal punishments, and sadistic laughter, left a lasting impact on the lives of countless prisoners. Her story unveiled the disturbing realities of human nature and the capacity for unimaginable evil. As history enthusiasts, it is our duty to confront these dark chapters and ensure that the lessons learned from the past guide us toward a future free from such horrors. If you found this video insightful, remember to show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel, History Bazaar. We greatly value your feedback, so please share your thoughts and questions in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.